So, chapter 6 opens up with Charles rekindling his romance with his old flame, Camilla. And things have just gone bad to worse between Diana and Charles. They're barely talking. They barely communicate. When they come down to Highgrove, they do not spend any time together. And when they do communicate, it's always arguments, horrible, horrible arguments. So Diana is taken to going back to Kensington Palace pretty much lunchtime on a Sunday. They just want to avoid each other as much as possible. And Charles is in the bath getting ready to go and visit his lady love, who is Camilla. Now, at this stage, it's not really common knowledge amongst the staff, but it is known amongst the staff at Highgrove. And I'll just read you a little snippet. At first, only the detectives knew of Charles' nocturnal visits, and as loyal servants would never have betrayed the trust placed in them by the heir to the throne. Charles would kiss Diana and the children goodbye on a Sunday afternoon and then fix up his evening ahead. The arrangement was long-standing, and eventually word was to leak out about the special friendship that still existed between the former girlfriend and the prince. Now, he used to use Paddy to actually deliver flowers and chocolates and things to Camilla because her house was about 20 minutes away. Her husband was never there. He used to live in London and when he wasn't at barracks. So it was, you know, all the main contenders knew what was going on, in other words. Now, the secret visits were let further out of the bag by Camilla's housekeeper, who was a personal friend of the Highgrove groom, Marion Cox, who excitedly kept a note of the number of visits made by the prince to her employer. So, you know, they're starting to cotton on, rumours are abounding, and whispers are afoot. Now, it's interesting that Wendy Berry has a great deal of sympathy for Diana at this time because she is under the impression that Diana didn't know what was going on. Now, that could be, but remember, Wendy Berry is quite isolated. She is only at Highgrove. She's not really in on all the juicies that are happening in other palaces. So she's quite innocent at this stage. It's in chapter 6 of this book, Wendy Berry is taking pretty much everything at face value. And you can tell that she feels a great deal of sympathy for Diana at this point, even though she's really aware, like I pointed out in the chapter before, that Diana's behaviour could be quite over the top and quite dramatic and quite damaging to the boys. She has sympathy for her. So one rainy night, Diana actually rings Highgrove. Despite the fact that most of us knew where he was going, Diana seemed blissfully ignorant of her husband's movements. One Sunday evening, she rang through to the pantry from London and asked to speak to Charles. Now, Wendy Berry, thinking on her feet, said, "Oh, he's just popped out for a moment," and then really hoped that she wouldn't ask where he'd gone. And she didn't. She just asked, "Oh, what car did he take?" Because then she would know which phone to ring, because evidently the cars were equipped with phones. So Wendy Berry told her which car he was in, and evidently Diana rang the phone in that car and gave Charles an absolute bollocking. Another major thing happened in this chapter, that it was the end of Barbara Barnes. Now, Wendy Berry says that there was a lot of tension over the Christmas between Barbara Barnes and Diana. And sure enough, by mid-January, they heard from Kensington Palace that Barbara Barnes was no more, would never be coming back to Highgrove. And actually, Wendy Berry said she never saw her again. And the assistant to Barbara Barnes actually took over from Barbara Barnes part-time because William was actually starting school. So they didn't really need a full-time nanny anymore. So that could have played a part in the fact that Barbara Barnes was, you know, ending at that point. There was a lot in the press at that time that it was because Barbara Barnes had actually gone off with Anne Glenconner and Lord Glenconner to Mustique to a big party to celebrate a birthday. And evidently Diana didn't approve that the nanny was sort of mixing in with such high celebrity circles. But that was really just the press reports at the time. Wendy Berry says, no, Diana gave happy permission for her to go off to that party, so she didn't think that that actually played a part. She thought it was more the power play between Diana and Barbara Barnes. And she said it was more about the fact that seeing Charles and Diana were doing so many overseas tours, Barbara Barnes would get the boys into this really good routine, and everything would calm down and everything would run like clockwork. And then Diana would come back and sort of want to see the boys whenever she wanted to see the boys. And Barbara Barnes, maybe foolishly, made Diana feel like she almost had to make an appointment to see her own sons. Now, that sort of power play goes on between nannies and, noble houses through millennia. I mean, that has always been the issue, the power play between the mother and the nanny. So we can't really blame Diana for that, and we can't really blame Barbara Barnes for that. It's just the way it was. The relationship ran its course, and I think seeing William was starting school, I think Diana thought, oh, this will be my perfect excuse to get out of this, be out of a relationship that wasn't really working for either one of them. That sort of power